Testing, testing.
We could hear you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Blank. It's 1 p.m. on September 3rd. We're back on the record in the Public Service Company of Colorado, DSP and VPP application. Any preliminary matters before we go back on the redirect of Mr. Mafazi? I guess in terms of witness order, we finish up McCurley, then go to Mafazi, then Boulder, Telechek, and then Klein. And then I guess one thing, Commissioner Gilman, do you have questions for Ms. Kapoloff from WRA?
Thank you for checking back in. I do not. Sorry for taking so long, but I don't.
No worries. So I guess, Mr. Barrasso, we can excuse Ms. Kapoloff.
Okay, thank you, commissioners.
And then does that witness order work for people, Mr. Simpson?
That works for us. Just wanted to let you know that Public Service has already waived Telecheck, and we will be waiving Murray.
Okay. So Telecheck is waived. Do you have any questions for Telecheck, Commissioner Gilman?
No.
Me neither. So Telecheck can be waived, excused. And who was the other one? Murray?
Murray, that's right.
Do you have questions for Murray, Commissioner Gilman?
I do not.
Nor do I. So Murray can be excused. Mr. Davidson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that schedule does work for the Business Coalition. Mr. Klein is online and available this afternoon for his testimony. Thank you.
All right. Anything else before we jump back to redirect? All right. I think we're on redirect of Mr. McCurley. Ms. Stanfield.
Hey, good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioner. Good afternoon, Mr. McCurley. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Can you tell me why IREC, a 501c3 nonprofit, advocates for access to grid data?
Sure. I think if you go back and look at the history of IREC's advocacy for publishing HCA data across all the states that IREC has participated in, you'll find that the common thread is really about providing transparent data about how the grid is constrained. And certainly providing that data, that transparency, benefits DER developers. But I think the primary aim of that advocacy is not necessarily to benefit DER developers. It's to allow better utilization of existing ratepayer funded grid assets in order to accelerate the transition to clean energy. And in that sense, publishing HCA data, I feel like, is pretty germane to the larger issues at play in this proceeding. The company is asking for lots of money to upgrade the grid, and I think the commission is rightly concerned that ratepayer money is spent only where it's truly needed. And providing transparent access to where the grid is most constrained, in particular where it's most load constrained, is critical to that inquiry. So I think that type of transparency is really not necessarily in the interest of developers. It's really in the public's interest, which is IREC's core concern.
Okay, thank you. In your written testimony and in the cross-examination yesterday, you acknowledge that it may be possible for a bad actor to use HCA data to somehow help to plan an attack of some sort. And you also acknowledge that, there are risks to the grid, and they're that are growing or otherwise, that it's a serious issue. In light of that, possibility that the data could be used somehow, can you explain how you recommend the commission evaluate what security measures are appropriate here?
Sure. I think that, as I explained in my testimony, I think fundamentally the issues that the company has raised here around grid security and publishing hosting capacity data really require the commission to make a policy decision. I think Mr. Mafazi and I have laid out, numerous use cases that explain the tremendous benefits that publishing this data will have. It will benefit developers, of course. It'll benefit researchers, but perhaps most importantly, I think it can benefit the commission and other state agencies. And so I really think the commission really has to make a decision here. Will it order the company to publish this data or not? And if the answer to that question is yes, which I sincerely hope is the case, then I suggest that there are other ways that the company can mitigate the risk, the security risks, however speculative those might be, of publishing this data. And most importantly, the ways that I've recommended really align with the recommendations of every national security agency that has looked into these issues. All of the reports that the company has cited really rely on the fact that even if armed with all the HCA data in the world, a malicious person who has this data still has to infiltrate the key systems that control access to the grid, and that can take out the grid. And so to protect against an attack, all of these expert reports really recommend that utilities should harden the systems that prevent malicious users from infiltrating those systems in the first instance. Not classifying data. Not a single report out there recommends that classifying HCA data is a viable means to protecting the grid.
Thank you. I believe you have experience in data security from your time as an executive with Oracle. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Based on that experience, can you explain how software engineers would normally approach questions of security?
Sure. I mean, I think they would approach questions of security in the same way that I'm recommending here, and that the commission think about these issues. As a preliminary matter, I'll just note that every engineer who writes and designs software at Oracle, and frankly any major software company that I'm aware of, is responsible for ensuring that the code that they write is not vulnerable to an attack. So based on my over 20 years of experience in software development, I have a pretty good understanding of the types of attacks that cyber criminals try to carry out, and in fact, how they try to carry those attacks. Because Our job as software engineers was to write software to prevent those types of attacks. And what I learned in my over 20 years of developing and designing software systems at Oracle is that security by obfuscation is really weak security. You can try to hide data, you can try to classify data, but eventually that data will leak. And I think if you go back and look at the history of data leaks in this country, you'll find that hackers are really ingenious, and they find clever ways to get access to the data. So if you really want to design a secure system, you really have to design it so that even if that data is exposed, even if that data is leaked in some way, the system is still secure. And I think that if you go back and look at the security reports and all of the recommendations, for example, DOE's recommendation on how to secure the electric grid, they all rely on the principle that you have to protect the system even if the data is out there. And for example, that's the principle behind the zero trust principle that I mentioned in my testimony, and that the DOE recommended that utilities implement. Assume the data is out there. How can you protect the grid from an attack? In this case, that is essentially the same recommendation that in the approach that I recommend that the commission take here. This HCA data may, however highly speculative it might be, may allow an attacker to infiltrate, to gain valuable insight into how to attack the grid. But if you secure the grid against an attack anyway, prevent it from being infiltrated, then you can protect the grid anyway.
And thereby get the benefits of the data for the intended use, right?
Yes, and that's exactly. I mean, that is really, in my mind, consistent with all of these expert reports, the best way to balance the benefits of providing this data, making this data available to everyone who needs it and can use it, and also securing the grid against an attack.
Okay. Yesterday, you discussed the fact that the California Commission ordered PG&E and the other utilities in California to publish detailed hosting capacity maps. Can you tell me a little bit more about exactly what the Commission ordered in California when examining these similar issues?
The California Commission? Sure. Yeah, in California, well, first of all, I think the utilities really in California never objected to publishing load data like the company is objecting to here. What they really didn't want to publish was the location of their distribution lines and other critical infrastructure such as substations and whatnot. And they argued that this locational data should have been classified and subject to a non-disclosure agreement as well. So in California, the utilities also argued that it should have been subject to a non-disclosure agreement. The commission, I believe, first asked the parties to see if they could come up with some compromise NDA that would work, and the parties could never reach an agreement. So the commission ultimately chimed in on this issue and concluded that NDAs in California were not required. And it also found that the data that the utilities sought to classify was not confidential in the first place because it was available via other publicly available sources, like Google Maps and other sources. And so it concluded that protecting that data would not, in fact, have any security benefit.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. The chairman and Mr. Marion both noted that NDAs are commonly used in a variety of settings. Does the fact that they're common in other sort of unrelated settings, because as far as I know, we don't know of them being used in the context of an HCA, mean that they should be used here? The fact that essentially, because they're common elsewhere, does that mean that they are acceptable for use here?
No, I don't think so, right? I mean, I think what I was trying to say yesterday is whether an NDA is a useful tool, it really depends on the type of data that's subject to the NDA. NDAs are appropriate for data that's primarily confidential, and they're not really appropriate for data that isn't confidential or that should not be treated as confidential. I think, Mr. Simpson pointed out yesterday that it's common, for example, for researchers to sign NDAs to get access to confidential data. Notwithstanding, I don't know exactly what those researchers are doing with that confidential data, but here I can certainly say, certainly the examples that I've highlighted in my testimony, the whole point of getting access to this data is to publish it, right? It's not to just use it. It's to actually publish the results. It's to look at the data, gain key insights from the data and publish interesting results from that data to the public. And so an NDA would really totally defeat the purpose of that kind of research and any other type of public knowledge of what's happening, you know, with the grid in terms of its load and its capacity to handle load or generation.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much, Mr. McCurley, and back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McCurley. You may be excused. Would you like to call up Mr. Mafazi?
Mr. Mafazi, are you here?
Not.
Hi there.
There he is. Can you hold up your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No,
If that changes, will you let us know?
I will.
Back to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mafazi. Could you state and spell your name for the record, please?
Midhat Mafazi, Midhat Mafazy.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by IREC as a regulatory engineer.
And in this proceeding, did you cause to be filed hearing exhibit 800, your answer testimony?
Yes,
And do you have that testimony before you today?
yes,
And if I asked you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
yes.
And was your testimony prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mafazi. Chair, Mr. Mafazi is available for cross-examination.
I have 15 minutes for the company, and it's 1:15. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Chair Blank. Good afternoon, Mr. Mafazi.
Good afternoon.
You answered that you were a regulatory engineer at IREC. What exactly does a regulatory engineer do?
Yeah, so regulatory engineer for IREC, we work on streamlining interconnection policies and rules around the country. So with various jurisdictions or states. So I've engaged in like right now in Colorado, but in other jurisdictions like Illinois and elsewhere.
So by streamlining interconnection, you're making it easier for developers to access utility distribution grids, right?
Streamlining interconnection specifically, I mean like rules and a playbook for evaluating DER interconnections that come in. So screening, how do you evaluate projects, whether it's small DER projects, it's larger projects. And I've also been, also involved in HCA work. And I'll note that before joining IREC, I worked for Ameren in Illinois as a DER engineer. So I was with Ameren for 6 years, also working on DER engagement, including HCA related work or initiatives for the utility.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So you do have experience planning, designing, and dealing with access to utility distribution grids, correct?
To some extent, yes.
And you are a master's in energy systems engineering?
Yes.
And what exactly is energy system engineering? And
yeah, so it's more of a hybrid program from University of Michigan, which works on or has a curriculum involved with DER related stuff. So energy storage, you look at deferral of investment. If you size energy storage on the distribution grid, how much deferral can you get from the feeders and so on. I also took various training courses on DR simulations and analysis, including working with EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, on simulation tools like OpenDSS. I've been involved with softwares like Synergy platform and so on.
okay,
Yeah.
but So you are not an electrical engineer.
Not with the title as an electrical engineer, but
Okay.
I have the same coursework. Yeah.
Okay. So we heard Ms. Stanfield redirect Mr. McCurley, and he talked a lot about cyber protections. Given your experience working with distribution grids, are physical attacks and physical protections a necessary part of protecting the distribution grid?
Just like protecting any system, security is important. But with the extent on this work, it's when you talk about security, it's more about looking at the real-time visibility on grid access. For example, you may have, like for example, when I was with Ameren, like with SCADA equipment, so you have real-time automation of distribution equipment at the substation on lines. And so you look at real-time visibilities, you can actually control the DER from the dispatch control center. The data that we are talking about here is different. These are based on a simulated workflow or load flow of the tools. So HCA is not, you cannot click on the HCA map and open an equipment on the field.
So you can't click on any, so, but you are proposing to have much more granular data produced by public service as part of your testimony, correct?
That's correct.
And I believe you are advocating also that data should be downloadable, correct?
That's correct.
So what is the purpose of having those maps downloaded to your company computer versus, say, just using the portal to access that information? What's the value there?
Yeah, so I want to start by saying I do take grid security seriously, and I want to be clear that I am not recommending unrestricted public access to raw grid models, which is what I was talking about. My testimony explicitly supports secure access protocols that allows users to download hosting capacity results through secure portal with appropriate access controls. The downloadable access I'm recommending is for screened hosting capacity outputs, not raw grid topology or SCADA data that I mentioned. These outputs are already being used safely in multiple states without documented security breaches. And this includes states that are already providing low HCA. So the question isn't open or locked. It's whether we can provide structured access to data that developers and planners need while still protecting sensitive infrastructure. I do believe we can do both because other states already are. And it's fair to point out again here that I defer to Mr. McKinley on technical security risk themselves, but I'll reiterate the hosting capacity values I'm recommending for download are aggregated simulation outputs, not live operational telemetry or physical grid schematics. What's more here with the downloadable that you're talking about, it's about bulk screening, which is a legitimate and essential use case for municipalities, school districts, transit agencies, and other public serving entities that try to plan large-scale EV or solar deployment. Today, those users are forced to click one node at a time. That's not a security strategy, in my opinion. It's a usability failure. So I support structured access, possibly even through user registration and logons. But what I don't support is blocking effective planning and de-escalating in the name of so-called blanket security concerns.
So given your background and your experience, well, let me start again. Are you aware of what information regarding public services system is publicly available?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you aware of what information regarding public services distribution system is publicly available?
I have familiarized quite extensively with the maps that are offered, the various HCA platforms, whether the tabular data, the unblood, the blood HCA map, as well as the load maps that are only restricted to this group. So I can talk about those if that's what you're referring
Okay,
to.
no, just making sure we understood each other. Now, you've spoken a lot here about all the states that allow HCA data or have mandated HCA data be public. Is that a fair characterization of your touch points in your testimony?
Seems right. Seems right. I highlighted a few. Yes.
Would you be surprised if I told you that the only evidence in this record identifying states who have mandated HCA data sharing, that 56% of the utilities in that survey do not provide HCA data?
I don't know how you're pulling that number, but I'm not looking at it. You can put it on the screen if you have it.
Can we pull hearing exhibit 915, please? Whoever's driving.
Yes, give me just a second.
Thank you. And I think it's probably page 25. There it is. Can you scroll down a little bit, please? Here's a summary of the only evidence in this record regarding the prevalence of the disclosure of HCA data. And do you see that it's not available in 56% of the sample?
When was this map table created? I guess the reason I'm asking this is because I saw a different one that was shared last week on the screen while I was looking at it. And that seemed like a higher number. So I'm not sure when you say this is the only publicly available, I'm not sure when was the last time you pulled that one.
I did not say publicly available. I said this is the only evidence we have in this record, and you're free to talk to your attorney on redirect to prove me wrong. But I just wanted to kind of point out, as we're running out of time, you know, based on the evidence in this record, public availability of HCA data does not seem to be available by the majority of utilities polled. Is that a fair statement based on this table?
If that's what you're getting from the table, sure.
Okay. Last question. You asked for a pretty significant additional amount of information from public service for their maps. That includes nodal data, time series data, and other kinds of data from that perspective. That seemed fair?
Yes.
And would you believe that a reasonable degree of automation would be necessary to be able for public service to timely provide that information?
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Would a reasonable degree of automation of the data and the collection of the data and the modeling of the data be a necessary prerequisite for public service to be able to efficiently provide that information?
So I have reviewed Mr. Minor's rebuttal, and I have a general familiarity with the challenges mentioned, and I will not downplay the efforts mentioned. Instead, my testimony tries to match the failed promises mentioned in the past with accountability. That's why I've recommended a phased approach with monthly updates required by the end of 26 to give the company a reasonable implementation window. And importantly, the company has already stated its intention to move to more frequent updates, again, repeatedly, but has not yet delivered. So the timeline I've picked, or the end of 26, matches with one of the timeline that was mentioned. I think it's more about accountability rather than doubting or downplaying the efforts mentioned.
That's fine. Do you have any sense of the costs that are that would be incurred by the company to be able to meet all of your recommendations?
I do not have a specific cost estimates. My role was not to conduct a cost analysis, but I do think it's important to put this in context. Public service currently updates its HCA maps annually, even though it has indicated for some time that it intended to move to more frequent
It's just fair to
updates.
say we don't know how much it will cost, correct?
Well, I guess I'm also saying that ratepayers are already funding the outputs today that are frankly outdated. They lack nodal level details and do not include specially visualized load hosting capacity.
And it's
So we're already funding those.
And it's IREC's position that ratepayers should continue to fund those on behalf of the developer community, correct?
Again, to me, it's about putting maps that are useful. So rather than just continuing to invest ratepayer dollars into this process, it's critical that the product be current, granular, and actionable. That's why I've recommended the commission to require monthly update by the end of 2026.
But it should be included in public services cost of service and recovered by public services customers, correct?
I don't understand the question.
Should there be a fee for the users of this information, or should the costs be included in rates paid by ratepayers?
That's not my call to make, because as I mentioned, ratepayers are already funding a tool that's frankly not useful. So my point with my testimony is to make it useful if ratepayers continue to fund the tool.
And if ratepayers don't continue to fund the tool because it's not useful, would you support users of the HCA maps to pay directly to support the costs of that kind of activity?
I think that goes beyond my testimony. I did not talk about rate paying cost or who should be paying for that.
So IREC doesn't take a position that developers could potentially be a reasonable source of funding for the HCA maps.
Again, I go back to my position that it's already being paid today. It's about making it useful. Whether the commission chooses it to continue to have ratepayer paying for it, business as usual as it's today, that's really not my call.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Mr. Goldman, any redirect?
Yes, I have a few questions for Mr. Mafazi. Hello again, Mr. Mafazi. Mr. Simpson asked you to describe your recommendation that the company provide HCA data in downloadable form. And as I heard your answer, you talked about the grid security issues related to that. But I think you didn't really get a chance to explain why downloadable data is so useful and important to clean energy developers and other entities. Could you do that, please?
Yes. So downloading HCA data is essential because it transforms the map from a static visual tool into a functional planning resource. I would say there are two main reasons for enabling the download feature on the map. First, the first one is the easy one. So it provides a clear pathway for the utility to share underlying data sets like the full 576-hour series profiles that I talk about in my testimony, and the associated technical limit violations like voltage, thermal protection, etc. So downloading is how that technical depth becomes usable. The second one, which I would like to elaborate on the second one further, is that developers and planners need to analyze grid conditions across sometimes dozens or even hundreds of locations at once. That kind of system-wide screening just isn't possible by clicking through a map one node at a time. Just to give you an example, imagine a transit agency is planning a medium and heavy-duty charging depot along a transportation corridor in Colorado. They want to find parcels of the grid or land that have at least 2 megawatts of available capacity, and ideally that are near available generation headroom. So this could be community solar pairing or something different. Trying to do this through the web map interface will be extremely slow and definitely error prone. But with the downloadable data, they can use a query. Just to give you an example, the query could say something like this: show me all nodes within 1 mile of I-70, Interstate 70, that meets these criteria or this dual criteria that I mentioned, the load and the generation. That sort of bulk screening is essential for efficient site selection, even project design. And some would even argue it's even supports equitable infrastructure planning, because there are some software and tools today that can take that data and overlay it with energy equi data to show visibility. So without downloadable access, you limit the HCA to a single point search tool, which doesn't support these sort of modern DER development like corridor planning. And that's why I recommended that users can automate the download process and integrate that bulk HCA data into the tools to support project siting.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson also asked you about your recommendation that the company provide time series data or a 576 analysis for the hosting capacity analysis. Could you explain, because I don't think the interaction with Mr. Simpson got at this, can you explain why having that time series data is so useful and why it's an important goal for the company to reach?
Yeah, and I think that's even more relevant to the questions that we have, the discussions we have been having with even the budget related stuff with the grid modernization plan. And I agree that so things that were mentioned earlier about load growth efficiency is one of the most pressing challenges that are facing the grid today, particularly as we try to meet Colorado's clean energy goals without placing that unnecessary burdens on ratepayers. So improving the HCA, especially by incorporating the 576-hour profile, is so important. Just to elaborate this further, the 576 structure captures the max and mean 24-hour profile for each month for both load and generation. That gives the company, the commission, regulators, and developers the ability to see when and where the system is strained and when headroom is available. So with that kind of sight or insight, we can better site flexible load, like EV chargers, at location and at times that minimize the grid stress. We can identify headroom for even behind the meter solutions or like storage or managed load programs. And perhaps importantly, we can avoid unnecessary upgrades by targeting investments where and when they're actually needed. So rather than relying on just the worst case hour of the year, which is the business as usual today, or the current practice for the maps, the 576 profile provides a much more nuanced picture of available capacity throughout the year that enables smarter decisions and more targeted use of ratepayer funds. So when I see 576 enhanced HCA as a planning tool, I can see the commission potentially helping the commission meet some of its many responsibilities, such as enabling growth and electrification, while also protecting customers from avoidable costs. So I see the HCA hourly profiles for both generation and load, not just making the data better, but it's also about making the infrastructure investment smarter.
Thank you. Just one last question. Mr. Simpson also asked you about potential computational difficulties that the company would face in providing nodal data. Is it your understanding that the company produces nodal data through the hosting capacity analysis already?
Yes, that's yeah, it bears repeating that the company models already produces nodal results. So we are just asking for them to be published.
So the
Yeah,
company produces that nodal data, they are just choosing not to publish it.
that's correct. And it's also important to paint why that nodal data is valuable today. The feeder level results that are available from the maps and as well as from the tabular data provide a general sense of where capacity may exist, but they don't tell you where the actual constraints are. The nodal level details that the IREC is asking for, so these go down to the segment level. They reveal the specific pinch point, whether the constraint is due to voltage, it's due to thermal, or protection criteria. I'll give you an example. I'm based here in Illinois, so I'm going to use a local analogy. Feeder level results are like saying there's traffic somewhere on Interstate 55, which goes from Chicago to St. Louis. It's useful, but it's vague. Nodal level data tells you exactly where the congestion is, and more importantly, why it's happening. And that why matters a lot when it comes to siting. As explained in my testimony, knowing which criteria is limiting capacity, whether it's voltage violation, whether it's thermal overload or protection related thresholds, all of which are done by the utility today within the HCA platforms, can completely change how a developer responds. As an example, a voltage constraint might be addressable with a smart inverter today, while a thermal constraint might require costly reconductoring. So without nodal data and without visibility into each limiting criteria, developers are flying blind. You can't support smart siting, targeted upgrades, or even flexible interconnection without that level of granularity. Feeder level alone simply doesn't get us there.
Thank you, Mr. Mafazi. Chair, I have no further questions for my witness.
Thank you, Mr. Mafazi. You may be excused.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Klein out there?
I am indeed.
Welcome. Can you hold up your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, Mr. Klein?
I do, Commissioner.
You put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No, sir.
If that changes, will you let us know?
Yes, sir.
Back to you, Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the reporter, Mr. Klein?
Sure. My name is Andrew Klein, Klein.
And who do you work for?
I work for a company called Westside Property Investment Company. We're a
And what do
local, we're a local real estate development and investment company.
And who are you appearing on behalf of in this proceeding?
I am representing the East Metro Area Business Coalition. We are a group of about 15 or 17 business owners, real estate developers, people who have taken a strong business rooting interest in the effectively eastern metro area just south of Denver International Airport.
And have you caused to have prepared two pieces of testimony in this proceeding? Your answer testimony marked as exhibit number 1200 and your cross answer testimony is exhibit number 1201?
Yes, sir.
Were those prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes, sir.
If I ask you the questions set forth in those pieces of testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir.
Did you also have a number of attachments that were included with your answer testimony exhibit 1200?
Yes, sir.
Was one of those an economic study done by the Aurora Economic Development Council?
Yes, and THK.
Yes. They were the consultant on that study?
Yes, it was prepared by THK. It was maybe under the direction of the Aurora Economic Development Corporation.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Klein's testimony has been admitted into the record already, Mr. Chairman. He's available for cross-examination.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Mr. Larson, I have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Klein, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon. I don't believe you and I have met before. I'm Matt Larson. I represent Public Service.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you. So I think you just went through this with Mr. Davidson, but you filed answer testimony in this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're testifying on behalf of the East Metro Area Business Coalition, right?
Correct.
And that's 17 businesses that represent more than 12,000 developable acres around the Denver metro area. Is that right?
That's correct. At least that much. And that's just in this direct area, but yes.
And the coalition that you're testifying on behalf of consists of property owners, real estate businesses, development companies, and others that, in your words, anticipate needing access to substantial amounts of electricity in the near future, correct?
Correct.
And I think you just talked about this with Mr. Davidson as well, but as part of your testimony, you brought forward a growth study that was commissioned by the Aurora Economic Development Council with respect to potential growth in the East Denver metro area, right?
Correct.
And that's attachment AK3 to hearing exhibit 1200, is that correct?
Sure. I'm not great at the legalese, but sure.
I'll represent to you that it's attachment AK3 to hearing exhibit 1200. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
No, sir.
So as a general matter, what does that study show from your perspective?
From my perspective, it shows that there will be continued growth over this area of study, which includes the area due south and a little bit east of Denver International Airport, east of E470, south of Denver International Airport.
And in Mr. Eiley's rebuttal testimony, so he's the company's policy witness in this case. He testified about the impacts of limiting distribution investments and limiting cost recovery for distribution investments. Are you generally familiar with that testimony?
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that he testified to is that there are unquantifiable economic development impacts from not building new capacity in a timely manner. Does that generally sound right to you?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if you had the privilege of watching this entire hearing, but I will represent to you that he was cross-examined earlier in this case about whether or not economic development impacts were quantifiable by counsel for staff with a commission. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
I do not.
And your attachment AK3 shows the economic development benefits from distribution system investment. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And is that why EMABC or East Metro Area Business Coalition entered into this proceeding and supported the GMAC stipulation that's been marked as hearing exhibit 133?
Yes, correct.
All right. I don't have any other questions. Thank you for your time, Mr. Klein.
Mr. Davidson, redirect.
I don't have any redirect unless there are any commissioner questions,
Oh.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Commissioner Gilman, any questions for Mr. Klein?
No questions. Thanks.
Neither do I. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Klein. Appreciate it.
That's it. I do. Okay, no comments from me. Just questions, huh?
I think so. Mr. Davidson, any redirect?
I guess one question that I would have on redirect, Mr. Chairman, for Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein, with respect to the analysis, the economic analysis for the EMABC service area that you described to Mr. Larson, the area that's configured there is the territory you described earlier, but the use of electricity in that area didn't really come through in Mr. Larson's questioning. Do you have a description of the type of distribution service that your coalition members would need in that area?
Well, I don't have a direct description of the exact type. I want to impress upon the commission how important we see keeping up with demand is, and not waiting until it's too late to have the distribution of this power. When asked, when polled statewide, the most important issue amongst Coloradoans is affordable housing. And I want to just make sure that it's clear from a real estate development perspective that growth is coming, but to the extent that we can't promise or can't guarantee, to the extent there's any uncertainty that there will be available power, it will be difficult to have home builders come and build in this area, or for Colorado to sustain the kind of growth that they've had in the past. And if we don't build more homes, the existing housing supply will only become more expensive. So I just want to impress upon the commission how important we believe it is, as people who are trying to help the economic and business growth of Colorado, that we have a strong distribution system from XL. XL has been a good partner. We've been working with very hard with them to discuss demand. And we are hopeful that the commission will take into consideration how imperative we believe it is to maximize the GMAC and be able to provide as much distribution of power as we can to the area.
Thank you. That's all.
Excuse me. I'd like to raise an objection and move to strike the witness's previous testimony. He was giving friendly. I think that we're all a little confused here because it appears that the company's cross, he's conducting friendly cross. I fail to see what issues the company and this witness disagree on. So to me, I don't think that any of this is admissible. But to the extent that it is, the last response the witness gave, he even stated that he was not asked about it by Mr. Larson. So therefore, it's not valid redirect. It should be stricken.
Not going to strike it, but the commission, I understand your concern, Mr. Smith, and the commission can always attach the weight it deserves. So,
and I understand that, Chair, and with all due respect, I respect the commission's ability to weigh it. I also respect the fact that we have evidentiary rules that establish what is and isn't admissible on the record. So I would ask that, just as a reconsideration, that it be not allowed to be present on the record.
Mr. Davidson, Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I think I'm entitled to ask Mr. Klein questions about his study. I want to see what he thinks the study stands for. I think it's relevant evidence. I had no idea what Mr. Klein was going to say in response to that, and I think it was a valid set of questions.
Mr. Davidson, anything to add?
Well, I mean, the objection could have been made at the time of the testimony. I don't think it's appropriate to move to strike it at this point. And I think, as you've indicated, Mr. Chairman, you can assign whatever weight you feel is appropriate.
May I respond, please? The objection wasn't lodged because the witness just gave an answer that was 2 minutes long and had nothing to do with the questions that were asked. So with all due respect, Mr. Davidson, I don't need you to tell me when I can lodge objections.
Overruled. Let's keep moving. The commission will apply the weight the testimony deserves. So with that, thanks for joining us, Mr. Klein.
Thank you for having me.
Let's bring Ms. Henry Sermos is next on my list. Mr. Hyatt. Oh, did you have a question?
Well, I was curious, according to my list, I don't think sweep NRDC witness Mr. Alatorre has been waived, and I think Commissioner Gilman and advisory staff may have had questions for him, and he was the last witness before the UCA witnesses.
Oh, my apologies, Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I just have some very brief questions.
All right, Mr. Alatorre.
Chair,
Ms.
I don't have
Dundas.
any questions. Sorry to speak over you.
Ms. Dundas, did you have something before we turn to Mr.
Yeah,
Alatorre?
thanks, Chair. Mr. Hyatt was correct. I had mentioned I may have questions for Mr. Alatorre, but I do not.
Oh, okay. Apologies. Mr. Alatorre, can you hold up your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can put down your hand. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No, they're not.
If that changes, will you let us know?
I will.
Back to you, Mr. Hyatt.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Alatorre. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Ramon Alatorre. First name is spelled Ramon. The last name is Alatorre.
Are you testifying on behalf of SWEEP and NRDC in this proceeding?
I am.
Who are you employed by and in what capacity?
I'm employed by SWEEP. I am the senior program manager for the utility program at SWEEP.
You submitted answer testimony in this case, which was marked as here in Exhibit 1400. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you also filed cross-answer testimony, which is here in Exhibit 1403. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Great. For the record, here in Exhibits 1400 and 1403 have already been admitted into evidence, and Mr. Alatorre is available for commissioner questions.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Alatorre.
Good afternoon.
I think it may just be one question, but so you expressed concerns about the potential rate impact of including such an expansive view of investments in advancing state policy goals, specifically identifying the resiliency category in your cross-answer testimony. You agreed with WRA that the category of asset health and reliability requires greater scrutiny. And you also expressed an openness to looking potentially at some reliability screen as part of the performance metrics or screening for GMAC recovery. And so I was wondering if you have anything specific in mind or if you've evaluated other ideas in the record with regard to the use of SAIDI or SAIDI by census block group, just so I could understand your perspective on what ideas your openness includes.
Yeah, I think prior to cross answer, I had not considered a resiliency screen. My openness was sort of to the WRA straw proposal that was put forward by Ms. Valentine. I know that she mentioned that that could potentially still use some refinement, but when recognizing that only one of the performance screening criteria is that's laid out in statute is required in the DSP, that being the interconnection timeline, we were, and that the proposal that was being brought forward was simply to meet existing interconnection timeline standards. We didn't think that necessarily sort of was indicative of performance and exceeding existing requirements. And so we were open to some ideas around how to think about bringing forward additional evaluations. And so we'd be open to perhaps building out on Ms. Valentine's sort of straw proposal, and had also mentioned a possibility of a performance screen connected to the size of NWAs as well, to reward based on the performance of the amount of demand response, energy efficiency, just the NWAs, and actually getting them in the field and implemented, and thought that could be something to consider as well. But I would mention that as a straw thought next to that straw proposal.
Well, given all these straws, what do you see as the right procedural path to actually establish and fully vet the performance screens so that they could be implemented?
I'm not sure that I have an exact procedural recommendation. I do know that we recommended in testimony that absent additional screening mechanisms to consider limiting the amount of type 2 investment eligible for GMAC recovery to being 50%, if all that is being done is meeting existing standards. If there was perhaps a new standard that was sort of settled upon here in this proceeding that was a performance standard that is a significant increase from the required recommendations, then perhaps more could be considered. But that was one way in which SWEEP considered sort of adjusting things based on the amount of performance screening that is required at this time.
Okay. And do you see the upcoming rulemaking as a potential avenue, or I don't know if you've given that any thought?
I think perhaps, I guess I'm not entirely, I don't have a strong opinion on the exact venue.
Okay. Those are my only questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hyatt, redirect.
I have no redirect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alatorre. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
UCA. Ms. Henry Summers, can you hold up your right hand? You swear to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
You can put your hand down. Is anybody communicating or with you in any way?
No.
If that changes, will you let us know?
Yes, I will.
Mr. Wittershine, back to you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Henry Sermos. Can you see and hear me all right?
I can. How about you? Can you hear me?
Yes,
we
thank
can.
you.
Okay. Okay, great.
Can you please state and spell your name?
Leslie, Leslie, Henry, Henry, Sermos, Sermos.
Thank you. Where do you work and what is your role?
I work at the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate as an analyst, as a rate and financial analyst.
And did you write answer testimony in this proceeding marked as hearing exhibit 600
I did.
along with its attachments?
That's correct.
Would the answers in your testimony be the same here today if I ask you the same questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Henry Sermos is available for cross-examination and commissioner questions.
Thank you. I have 20 minutes across from the company, and it's 2 p.m. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Ms. Henry Sermos.
Hi, Mr. Larson. How are you?
So far, so good. It's nice to see you. Just a few questions for you. You're UCA's lead witness in this case, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're familiar with the concept of a Grid Modernization Adjustment Clause, or a GMAC, right?
That's correct.
And UCA proposes a rejection of the GMAC, correct?
That's correct.
So UCA doesn't believe that Senate Bill 24-218 requires the establishment of a GMAC in this proceeding?
I think that question would be better answered by Mr. Villarreal. He is the witness that wrote testimony on the GMAC. However, I can just add to that we believe that the levels of recovery that the company is proposing through the GMAC are above those that are in the public interest. And therefore, we propose either rejection, or we would be willing to potentially agree to staff's proposal regarding a limit on the GMAC, and the proposal to recover only those that are considered type 1 investments.
So your position now is that either reject the GMAC or you support staff's $25 million static GMAC cap? Is that UCA's position now?
We continue to support an original rejection of the GMAC. However, we would be willing to consider somewhere of what
and Mr. Villarreal, I'm sorry, I talked over you. We had a little latency there.
No, that's okay. I was just saying something to the extent of limiting GMAC recovery as proposed by staff.
Okay, but you're not the witness taking a position on whether Senate Bill 24-218 requires a GMAC to be established or not?
No, I am not. That's Mr. Villarreal.
Okay. So UCA prefers a rate case filing in lieu of a GMAC. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, I guess you could say that. Not that we would prefer it, but we do believe that it is the prudency review would be necessary, and that would be done properly in a rate case.
But you'd agree with me that the company's GMAC proposal has a prudency review component, wouldn't you?
I would say that it does not completely comply with the prudency review. I believe that prudency review is full. It's fully expressed and fully covered through a rate case, more than it could be within this proceeding.
But are you familiar with the company's April 1 reporting filing that they propose as part of the GMAC, where a prudency review occurs at that time?
I am not.
You're not. Okay. So moving over to budgets briefly, have you been watching the hearing over the last several days?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And I'll represent to you that staff witness Mr. Haglund took issue with the GMAC, but he didn't necessarily take issue with the company's budget. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
No, I do not.
And CEO witness Mr. K, I spoke with her yesterday, and similarly, she had some critiques of the GMAC and recovery through the GMAC, but she didn't oppose the company's budgets. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
I do not.
You do not? Okay.
I do not.
Thank you. Sorry, we had a little breakup there. And then you're aware that several parties have joined a stipulation in this matter, marked as hearings about 133 to support the company's budgets. Are you not?
I am.
Now UCA actually has some more explicit budget reductions that it's proposed, correct?
That is correct. Those are covered by UCA witness Rao Kanidena.
Is Mr. Conadina the right witness to speak to about that, or are you?
That's correct. Mr. Konidena is.
Okay. I'll take that up with Mr. Conadina then. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have anything further.
Commissioner Gilman, questions for Ms. Henry Sermos?
No questions, thanks.
No questions for me either. Mr. Wittershine, redirect?
No redirect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Henry Sermos.
Thank you.
Mr. Villarreal, can you hold up your right hand? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Oh, you're muted. You can put down your hand on mute. There, you got it. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can put your hand down. Is anyone with you or communicating with you in any way?
No.
If that changes, will you let us know?
I will. I'll note that I anticipate a 11-year-old girl to come traipsing in my front door in about an hour. So if I'm still on, just letting you know.
Well, we'll see, maybe. Back to you, Mr. Wittershine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Villarreal has notified me he's having some technical connection difficulties. Hopefully it's not an issue, but I wanted to make you aware.
Okay.
Mr. Villarreal, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you please state and spell your name?
My name is Christopher Villarreal, CHRISTOPHER. Last name is spelled VILLARREAL.
Where do you work and what is your role?
I'm the president of Plugged In Strategies.
Did you submit on behalf of UCA your answer testimony, hearing exhibit 601, your cross-answer testimony, hearing exhibit 604, and your testimony opposing the settlement agreement, hearing exhibit 607, and the associated attachments?
I did.
If I ask you the questions in your testimony here today, would your answer still be the same?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Villarreal is available for cross-examination and commissioner questions.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Keene, I have 20 minutes. It's 2:07. Fire away.
Can you hear me all right?
we can.
Thanks so much. Hello, Mr. Villarreal. Nice to meet you. For the record, I'm Sarah Keene, representing Advanced Energy United. I'd like to focus my questions today on your settlement testimony regarding the Aggregated Virtual Power Plant, or AVPP settlement agreement. You are UCA's only witness addressing the AVPP settlement agreement, correct?
Correct.
But you didn't address the company's AVPP program in your answer or cross-answer testimony, correct?
I did not explicitly address the AVPP, correct.
Okay. And in your settlement testimony, you described that UCA does not oppose all of the terms in the AVPP settlement agreement, right?
I believe that's correct. Just the areas that I focused on are the ones that we had opposition to explicitly.
Okay. And primary focus, or maybe one of those focus areas, was the settlement agreement's lack of a competitive solicitation at the program's initial rollout, correct?
Correct.
And your primary recommendation relating to that issue is that the commission order competitive solicitation at the outset of the program. Is that right?
Yeah, the recommendation is that a competitive solicitation be used at the start of the program, correct?
Thank you. Are you familiar with Senate Bill 24A-0547E?
I am aware of it, yes.
Do you recall that that bill provides that the VPP program must have requirements for a standard tariff or tariffs to set performance requirements and performance-based aggregation for the DER aggregator? Does that sound right?
If you wouldn't mind bringing up, I don't have a copy of the bill with me, if you wouldn't mind.
No.
Putting on
Yeah,
screen.
no problem. If we could bring up here in Exhibit 1405, please.
I'll have to put my glasses back on for this as well.
Thank you very much. And if we could jump to page 25 when we get there. Thank you. And under paragraph B6, it says that it must have requirements for a standard tariff or tariffs to set performance requirements and performance-based compensation to the DER aggregator. Do you see that? Does that sound correct?
I see that language, correct.
And how did UCA's recommendation that the entire AVPP program be procured through a competitive solicitation align with the statutory requirement in your position?
So, the rest of the section is not on the screen, so just want to note that. So I don't think there's anything inconsistent with having the procurable component of the AVP program be subject to competitive solicitation. The competitive solicitation would also include all these similar requirements, and it may also be that the performance, as well as any additional technical requirements, would be laid out in a similar manner to a competitive procurement solicitation. So, for example, performance requirements, as well as things like how responsive is a device or an aggregate amount of devices, those would all seem reasonable in my mind to be laid out as part of a tariff, but the actual procurement, going out and signing up contracts, that's what would be subject to the competitive procurement process.
Okay, thank you. But nothing in Senate Bill 24-218 requires the commission to direct the company to use a competitive solicitation, correct?
The statute does recommend and require, and I don't remember the exact word for the section in my
Yeah, maybe we could pull, if you could, sorry to interrupt, but we could pull up, move to page 28, please. And under paragraph H, which is a little further down. So this says that the commission shall determine whether to direct a competitive solicitation, but it does not require a competitive solicitation. Is that accurate?
I believe that leaves that determination up to the commission.
Great, thank you. UCA's opposition to the settlement, the ABPP settlement, is primarily based on your belief that a competitive solicitation can provide ratepayer savings, correct?
It is a recommendation that competitive procurement will allow for more market deployment, more market development, more price transparency, and a more diverse set of technology solutions that, when taken together, would result in a lower cost to implement the program and procure resources. So I guess it's
So is it your position that a competitive solicitation will always or almost always result in the lowest cost solutions?
I think it's better off starting with a competitive solicitation, because that way we allow the market to determine what is bearable by consumers and by the marketplace to drive those costs, compared to in this case, a settled price. So if the market can go out and procure things at a lower cost, then they should be able, then we know that that would be at a lower cost. Until we have that price discovery, I suppose we don't know, but I think the market, given a chance, would respond accordingly.
So considering that we don't know, as you say, what that outcome would be, do you have any sort of personal or direct experience with competitive solicitations for VPPs or other demand reduction products?
I am not a VPP developer, if that's your question.
Or just in your capacity on behalf of the UCA or in other prior roles, have you had any direct experience looking at, evaluating, working with in any capacity a competitive solicitation for VPPs?
For VPPs, not explicitly. I have some experience in reviewing competitive solicitations more broadly in prior roles as commission staff. Of course, those were subject to confidentiality.
That's fine. We don't need to go into the details of those. And actually, in your settlement, you attached a report regarding all source competitive solicitations, which was marked as attachment CD10. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that report primarily focuses on solicitations for the bulk power system. Is that right?
I don't recall it that way. For example, it does discuss Colorado's ERP competitive solicitation requirements, which are for IRPs. So it's not, I wouldn't call it bulk necessarily. I would just call it best practices for implementing competitive solicitation that can then be applied to the situation in which the competitive solicitation is being considered.
But the report is not specific to competitive solicitations for demand side products. Is that correct?
That report, it does not address VPPs. I don't believe VPPs were really no, it does not.
Okay, thank you. And the company already conducts and the commission requires competitive solicitation for the bulk power system through the ERP. Is that correct?
That is one example. They also do it for non-WELS alternatives, which we have talked about probably, which has been part of this proceeding. So it's not entirely limited to bulk power system issues.
Right. But the public services competitive solicitation for non-wires alternatives have not generally been successful, right?
Correct, and I suppose we can, yes, PSCO has not successfully done a non-wires alternative solicitation.
Thanks so much. You're aware that Advanced Energy United joined the ABPP settlement, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware, presumably, that the settlement addressed the issue of competitive solicitations?
Yes.
And did you review the settlement testimony of United's witness, Brian Turner?
I did review Mr. Turner's testimony.
And do you recall that he stated that United supports the provisions of a competitive solicitation as part of the totality of the settlement terms? Or does that, any reason to dispute that?
No, that sounds right.
Do you also recall that Mr. Turner testified that figuring out the timing of competitive solicitations is critical to their success?
Correct.
Thank you. And the timing laid out in the settlement agreement is that the company can propose a competitive solicitation for the ABP program after 2 years of program operation, right?
That is the proposal, but I'll note that the settlement also provides the opportunity for the utility to propose after 2 years to end the program entirely. And so waiting for 2 years, it does provide some uncertainty as whether or not we'll actually ever get around to competitive solicitation, because the utility may decide to end the program after 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Did you also review the cross-answer testimony of Mr. Turner responding to UCA's recommendations related to a competitive solicitation?
I do not recall. I believe I read it, but I don't have a strong recollection of what he said. So if you do have a citation, that would be great to pull up on the screen.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me ask you about a couple general ideas that he spoke about. I'm happy to bring those up if that's helpful. Mr. Turner described what he called the chicken and egg problem associated with competitive solicitations in this area. Do you recall that?
Yes, I believe that, yes.
Okay, and so by the chicken or egg problem, can we agree that he meant aggregators cannot enroll customers under concrete pricing and terms until they bid into and are selected in the solicitation? But at the same time, it's difficult for aggregators to bid into or win a solicitation without recruiting customers. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, I believe that's an accurate summary of this testimony.
Thank you. And do you think a customer would enroll in a brand new ABBP program without knowing the terms or requirements or the compensation that would be involved?
I don't think that has anything to do with the program itself. I think that is whatever the aggregator decides it can work on with the customer. And so if the aggregator says, I have a program and I'm willing to compensate you at price A, and the customer decides whether price A is reasonable or not, that's between the customer and the aggregator. If the aggregator can then, so that's a decision between the aggregator and the customer.
Do you think it might discourage customers from enrolling with that aggregator and going through the process of doing that if they don't even know if the aggregator will be successful in the solicitation?
Again, I don't, that seems to be a decision entirely between what the aggregator wants to develop and whether or not it thinks it can get customers to sign up for a program, sign up for an aggregation at a certain price or not. That's the purpose of market and price transparency. So if an aggregator wants to sign a bunch of customers and think that they can win a competitive solicitation, then it should then develop its market products appropriately and its pricing.
Do you think that as compared to competitive solicitation, a standard offer program would provide more certainty regarding the terms and requirements and compensation?
I think it may provide more certainty, but if the market can do the same service at a lower price, that means the ratepayers are footing the bill for a higher cost service.
If an aggregator bids into a competitive solicitation and wins without recruiting its customers first, it would then bear the risk that it couldn't enroll customers under the selected terms and conditions of the winning bid, right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I was trying to follow along with you.
Sure. If an aggregator bids into a solicitation and wins without recruiting customers first, then the aggregator would bear the risk that it couldn't enroll customers under those terms and conditions. Correct?
Certainly, that's the market. That would be the risk borne by the marketer. Yes.
Okay. But this wouldn't only impact the aggregator, right? It would also impact the company's reliance on the aggregator's ability to bring customers into the program to provide those services, right?
To the extent that there are performance obligations required in whatever is attached to it, to the agreement, to the bid construct, and if an aggregator does not perform, then it would be subject to whatever is required to be subjected to under the contract. Would it then mean that the utility would rely less on that aggregator? I can't say that that would be up to the bid products and the utility who's seeking to procure the service.
Well, and wouldn't that impact the commission's goals to encourage and leverage the resources and benefits that a BPP could provide if we don't, if we have risks that aggregators might leave the program after being selected?
Again, I think from a market-based perspective, we would want aggregators to show up and work with consumers to develop appropriate aggregation products and be responsive to utility competitive solicitations. The ability then of the aggregator, to meet its performance obligations is then up to the aggregator to do so. If it fails, then it fails and is subject to whatever consequences it's responsive to. The flip side of in addition to that, if there is a failure, then that also means that another product that may also have been useful can step into its place and fill in any gaps. And so again, we have the opportunity for more price transparency and discovery of market solutions and market products and what prices people are willing to bear and be rewarded for their participation.
Mm-hmm. In order for an aggregator to submit a bid, it would have to make educated guesses as to what distributed energy resources might exist among the potential customers, where those are, and what price those customers might be willing to make them available, right?
Correct.
And so if an aggregator has not yet been selected through a competitive solicitation, is it able to offer customers certainty regarding the compensation and terms and conditions based on those educated guesses?
If it wasn't picked for a competitive solicitation, then its price would have been too high, and now it learned that it's not competitive.
Do you think it's likely that some customers just would choose not to enroll if the compensation and terms and conditions are uncertain because they're sort of based on guesses at the outset?
Again, I think that is something between the aggregator's business model and whatever product it wants to offer with its customers when it signs up a customer. So if it wants to be cautious and provide lower payment to its customers and ensures itself that it can win a bid, then that's a strategy that it can entail. If it wants to take a different strategy, then it's free to engage in that strategy as well.
And if it were to engage in a different strategy and is not being cautious with regard to pricing, then isn't it possible that it sort of sets its price higher than we might get through a standard offer program?
Well, that's what the competitive solicitation would provide. If their price is too high, then they don't get dispatched. They don't win. They don't participate in the bid because the competitive market would have, presumably, we would have multiple vendors as like your members and myself. We would want to have a very robust marketplace. And so we'd want to have competition amongst the aggregators to really fight out to drive down the price and the cost of the program. And so if someone is too high because they had their strategy resulted in too high of a bid, then now they've learned and can go on and find another market product or another opportunity to participate in those.
Isn't it possible that sort of across all the aggregators that submit bids, because of this inherent uncertainty, everyone brings up their prices potentially higher than is strictly necessary because of all this uncertainty?
I can't speak to what an aggregator bidding strategy or contractual strategy might be. I guess to the extent that all the aggregators show up at too high of a price or at a higher price than we all might be comfortable with, that certainly is a possibility. But I would expect that an aggregator would want to win a bid and would not want to not win a bid.
Okay, just a couple more questions. Thank you very much. Do you recall in Mr. Turner's testimony where he provided an example of a competitive solicitation in Arizona to select a third-party aggregator?
I remember the conversation vaguely. but I know that he did bring up an example in Arizona.
Any reason to dispute, his testimony that in Arizona, the Corporation Commission there ordered Arizona Public Service to conduct a competitive solicitation, which ended up failing because the winning aggregator realized after the solicitation that its products were not good fit for the market and it could only enroll 19 customers? Any reason to dispute that?
I would not dispute that's his summary. If there was one aggregator that won, then perhaps the product design could have been better.
Wait, let me just check the notes. I think there's just a couple more questions. So you've stated, I believe, that a competitive solicitation would be maximizing benefits to ratepayers, correct?
Yes.
And maximizing benefits to ratepayers from the ABB program could include adopting the least cost program, right?
Yes.
But can we also agree that there are other benefits to ratepayers from a successful ABBP program?
Yes.
And this could include deferring or avoiding broader system investments. Is that right?
Yes.
And would you agree that this benefits to ratepayers of the ABBP that these benefits of the ABBP program depend on the scale of the program, where a larger program is likely to yield more potential avoided cost benefits?
Yeah, I would agree that if there are more participants and more product offerings and more of them are selected, that would be beneficial to ratepayers, because now we're relying more on third-party and customer-based solutions and not utility and capital investments.
And do you think that there is a risk, based on the uncertainties that we've been discussing today, that there could be fewer ultimate aggregators that are selected as a result of a competitive solicitation than we would get through a standard offer program?
Let me see if I got your question right. Is the question that if there are not enough participants in a competitive solicitation compared to a standard offer, that there would be fewer benefits? Is that generally the right question you asked?
Yeah, I guess there's sort of two parts. Let me take it. Do you think it is possible that because of the risks inherent with a new competitive solicitation process, we might end up with fewer selected third-party aggregators than we would if we were using a standard offer program?
I don't know if I can answer that. I don't know. I don't know what, again, I don't know what the strategies, what every aggregator's position is on what would make them money. I would like to see them be successful, and I think we are in agreement that we'd like to see lots of aggregators and have this program be a tremendous success. But I don't think I can say what the economics of an aggregator is, and whether or not they would be, how they would respond.
Okay. Last two questions here. You mentioned in your testimony that a competitive solicitation can reduce the risk that the utility will seek to increase its own rate base and opportunity to earn by using the company's own services. Is that a fair summary?
I think so.
Happy to pull it up if you prefer.
I think so.
Okay. Great. But under the ABP settlement agreement, during at least the first 2 years when there would be no competitive solicitation, the company will not seek to participate as an aggregator in the program, correct?
That is my understanding that of the settlement, that the utility will not participate in the first 2 years.
Okay, so under the settlement agreement framework, we can agree that the risk that the company will seek to increase its own rate base by choosing its own resource is not relevant, correct?
Yes.
Great. No further questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Althouse. I have 15 minutes and it's 2:30.
Hello, Mr. Villarreal. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Mr. Althouse?
I'm fantastic. We're going to talk about DSOs. That's about as exciting as it can get. I want to refer mostly to your testimony, 601 answer testimony. page 8, you made a number of recommendations in the case, and the first one that I'd like to explore with you is you recommended to reject adoption of the company's 2050 Grid of the Future proposal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, we heard the last couple days, particularly with witness Mino for the company, he was asked many questions about the company's ratepayer funded modeling capability. He was asked, you asked, can you do least cost modeling? No. Are you aware of any tool that can? No. They asked how often it was updated. This is all loads here. Not very often because it's so very, very, very complex. A number, including commission, ask, well, when you create a model, can you revert it back to the original and change an assumption and run it again? No, you can't. UCA had asked if LoadSeer can model solar and storage for 125,000 homes that already have solar and 150,000 EVs. Didn't appear they could model vehicle to grid as well, considering all EVs to simply be loads. Would you agree that you could define innovation as that which the status quo cannot visualize?
Would I define? I don't know if I would define it. I guess I can accept your definition. I don't know if I actually have, I don't know if I have a definition, perhaps as concise as yours just was. But I'll accept your definition.
Well, the only constant is change. Now, we know that the company's tools can't see next month or 6 months from now, let alone the future. And it seems Colorado has a desire to be a leader in the energy transition. And typically being a leader means you need to do what others haven't done. So you have to break new ground. And to me, it looks like the company's plan is kind of like the old hammer and nails when AI controlled robot arms can run a screw gun, a welder, or even a scalpel. And they're not really looking at that kind of innovation. So your other recommendation, number 3, same page, is to open a new proceeding to determine alternative frameworks for future distribution operations, including the use of a distribution system operator. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a wannabe prosumer. And one of the things that Colorado has done first in the country is define what a prosumer is. Throughout this case, particularly in all of company testimony, the word was never used. And our new statute 218 defines a prosumer as a participant on a AVPP. So you had talked a lot about in your settlement testimony about competition being what might drive protection for ratepayers. And particularly, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about how prosumers might change the game. A lot of aggregators are talking about profitability, but in reality, it's the prosumer who makes the investment in the DER that the aggregator is going to manage. Would you agree with that?
I believe in many cases, the consumer will be making a number of investments. So yeah, I would agree with that. The consumer is the one who's going to be doing much of the spending.
Yeah, and once an investment is made, they become a prosumer. They're not a consumer customer any longer. And so I'm want to know more about how UCA sees rates. So if the utility makes an investment in the distribution system, 100% of that cost plus a profit goes into the rate base and the ratepayers bear all the cost. Is that correct?
To the extent the commission approves those costs to be recovered, those then will be recovered in rates, correct?
Okay. Now, in this case, in the virtual power plant, a prosumer makes the investment in the DER. So that's not in the rate base, correct?
Correct.
So if we're comparing cost, there's a big difference between 100% cost plus a profit and zero cost by the prosumer.
Correct. If a customer is making an investment on their own and using their own funds, those costs are not going to be collected through rates.
So should people in charge of protecting ratepayers see the prosumer as the superhero of rate reduction?
I think what my testimony is trying to get at on this is there are going to be and are a number of services and resources that could be utilized leveraging distributed energy resources. And the question that should be considered is how is the state going to better access, utilize, and leverage those new investments being made by consumers or by in other entities like aggregators that are working with consumers to their benefit? How do we better utilize those things for this and identify and then procure the services that they can provide?
Excellent, thank you. Now, your distribution system operator. Now, at the wholesale level, there's an RTO that regulates a market to make sure that it's a fair trading platform for participants. And we're seeing developments around the world where the DSO is being considered as a retail level trading platform that ensures fair competition between participants, in this case, prosumers, that they can compete and that there's no anti-competitive nature to that market. You had in your settlement testimony talked about competitive solicitation. Couldn't like the state be an aggregator that runs an open trading market for prosumers to participate directly in real time with the ability to accept or not accept a value for their output?
Could the state do that? I don't quite know how to answer that question. I guess it's possible at some point if the state decides that it wants to enter into that position, then the legislature could direct an entity to be created to act in that role. I don't have an opinion whether or not, I don't know if that would be a good or bad thing, but I guess I would agree that if the state decides that it wants to do that, the state could decide to do that. And
thank you. What I was getting at, as a prosumer, I have to decide what I'm going to invest in, what the ROI for my investment in a DER is going to be. And I see two layers of what could be an anti-competitive environment. Number one, the aggregator themselves. Now, an aggregator is going to give me an offer. I don't get to be a negotiator. Basically, the aggregator goes, here's what we'll give you to do such and such. And it's take it or leave it. I really don't have the ability to negotiate with the aggregator. And then at the higher level, we have the company who is really not really excited about competition in a lot of ways. And so the idea of creating competitive markets, don't we need some way to give prosumer protection since they're the ones who actually make the investment, typically not the aggregator nor the company?
Well, I guess I'll say a couple different ways here. The benefits of consumer investments can fall into a number of different categories. And I think if you aggregate the individual consumer services, that has the potential to provide more meaningful solutions and services to, let's call it the distribution system operator, whoever's operating the distribution system. And the individual, the prosumer, the question is really going to be how much services can one consumer provide when there is going to need to be lots of different types of services of different scales and sizes and aggregations. So if you have a large consumer like we have today with industrial customers who can do that. If you have an individual consumer with a relatively low load, I think the question is really going to be, is it worth it to the consumer to do that? Now, should they have the opportunity? I think I think it's something that should be discussed, and that's part of what was in my testimony is looking out to 2050, we need to figure out we need to start having that conversation of what is the distribution system going to look like going out in the next 25 years, because we know technology advances, the needs will change, the services that will be available will change. And so there may be opportunities for smaller customers on an individual basis to do that. And it may be that an individual residential consumer, for example, could do that. But we just have we're sitting here in 2025, and if we want to look out to 2050, we have to figure out how are we going to get from here to there. And if the commission decides based on its existing rules that we want to have that conversation, then that should be part of the conversation is how do we make sure all consumers are able to participate?
Great, thank you. In your testimony, page 16, lines 4 through 13, when you had some discussion about a DSO, the one that really struck me was a DSO is an organizational model where functions of the traditional utility are reorganized to enable and integrate new services and resources in a more neutral manner. And that also, the DSO becomes a way for the utility to better manage and respond to the increasing complexity of operating the grid that Mr. Mino mentioned many times. Oh, it's so complex, it's so complex. And what I want to get at with this neutral manner that you mentioned is throughout the legislation, there's two words that are very driving on distribution system modernization: strategic and affordable. Now, those two words have come up many times and crossed with witnesses, and that depends on where you sit. This is a very subjective set of two words. And what's strategic and affordable to the ratepayer, and what's strategic and affordable to prosumers is way different than what the utility might consider to be strategic and affordable. And I see that the DSO platform itself might be the only way to go to that neutrality you mentioned, to be able to nod towards what ratepayers, prosumers would consider to be strategic and affordable deployment of DER assets?
Yeah, from my perspective, the idea of the DSO is in fact to figure out ways to reduce complexity. And this becomes sort of the challenge, is that if we have a utility that wants and needs and insists on visibility and operates control of everything at the end of the system, then of course it's going to be increasingly complex, because a customer may have 3, 4, 5 devices or more inside their home that can be responsive. And if the position of a utility is we want to make sure we have visibility and control of each of those devices, then you're just going to run into a computing power problem at some point and just will not be able to work. And so an idea around the DSO, as well as things like grid architecture, is to ensure that is to address this complexity in a more logical and organized manner, so that the roles and the market rules and the functions of the grid are done in such a way that what is controllable by the utility, or what needs to be controlled by the utility, is controllable. But then how it responds and reacts to things outside of its control, it has enough systems and functionality inside of its system to be responsive enough without needing full individual control. And so the DSO would be working with aggregators who would be better placed to deal with this than the utility. So again, we're trying to minimize the complexity of an increasingly complex system. And so we need to sort of think about what are the better operational structures that can we put in place to address this increasing complexity.
Excellent. I think my time is just about up, but one of your last recommendations was that the hosting capacity maps and information should be public. Now, I know neither you nor I are a terrorist. And so, but there's something very obvious to me in all the testimony on this issue, was the distribution system being the target. I don't know, if I was a terrorist, I think I would blow the transmission system and take out the whole town. I wouldn't be trying to take a block. I know that's not your deal, but could you agree that we can't have a fair and open market unless everyone can visibly see where value is on the distribution grid?
I agree that data is a really important component of enabling a market and as a function of the distribution system. That's why I pointed both to one of the recommendations in the main report, as well as a recommendation from the United Kingdom regarding the importance of accessibility to data. That's sort of the foundation for the neighborhood grid framework, which is that data is going to be one of the foundational components of the distribution system going forward, including the role and use of consumer-owned assets and DER more broadly. In that, without access to that information, consumers will be operating a little blind as to what benefits they can provide to the system.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony, Mr. Real. Thank you, Commission, for letting me hear. Thank you.
Thank you. The company, I have 30 minutes and it's 2:50.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Villarreal. I just wanted to confirm that your proposal to reject the GMAC, are you saying that the GMAC should not be established?
I do not believe that is exactly what I said. I recognize that the legislature requires a GMAC, and that the GMAC is a process by which costs can be recovered. What my testimony suggested or recommended is that the GMAC, the proposal to recover costs, sorry, let me rephrase this. I'm coming over a cold, so you have to bear with me as I keep talking here. The question is really, where is the appropriate place to deal with prudency and determine the recoverability of costs? And so the idea would be, if the commission through a rate case says these costs are recoverable, then they are recoverable through the GMAC. And so it's the opposition to the utility's proposal to use the GMAC process as the means of determining prudency and recoverability.
I see. So you disagree with the legislature's fundamental directive?
I wouldn't say I disagree with the legislature. I think the commission, much like Mr. Hagley the other day said, I believe the commission has substantial discretion in how it wants to deal with the recoverability of costs and what is allowed under those costs. I'll also note that the bigger issue that I have with the GMAC is it really then sort of calls into my mind the purpose of the distribution system planning process itself. The testimony that has been provided, the written testimony and a lot of the conversation I've been able to listen to so far, we've all been focusing on the costs, right? And the costs are really important, of course. We haven't been talking about the future. Because what happens in rate cases, like we're seeing today when we talk about costs, is that we all want to talk about costs. And so what in my mind then means, then what is the purpose of the distribution system plan if we're not going to talk about the plan, we're going to talk about the costs?
Okay. So you're essentially saying that the GMAC should be rolled into a historic test year rate case.
I'm saying the costs that can be recovered for the prudency should be determined in the rate case. And much like Ms. Henry Sermos talked about earlier, if the commission is looking for an alternative, then there are alternatives proposed, including by staff.
Thank you. Real quickly about some HCA data. If I'm reading your testimony correctly, you're saying that all HCA data should be provided publicly with no security protections. Is that right?
Based on my review of other utilities processes, I've not found evidence provided by the utility to justify keeping hosting capacity data confidential to the extent that it has done so far. And so absent a finding by the commission of substantial evidence that the data should be kept confidential, my opinion is that the data should be made public.
So you disagree with IREC's proposal that reasonable security measures for protection of the information is not appropriate, or is appropriate, I should say.
I would not disagree. So I guess I'll put it this way. My position is that if there's data that should be confidential and kept confidential, then we should have a conversation of what that data should be and why that should be then kept confidential. To the extent data should not be kept confidential, then it should be made public.
So, and if I'm hearing you right, that having that discussion about what data should be kept confidential is your alternative proposal to have a separate proceeding to make those determinations. Is that correct?
My testimony suggests an alternative, but I would note that my alternative suggestion is not limited to hosting capacity data. My alternative suggestion is to talk more broadly about grid data, which could be things beyond what's available through hosting capacity through an HCA. And so an HCA in my mind is a use case of this conversation and should not be the only part of the conversation if the commission so decides to consider an alternative to having this conversation. Sorry, let me restate this a different way. If the commission decides to use my alternative suggestion and go and use the neighbor grid data framework, that conversation is going to need to be broader, and my recommendation is broader than just HCA data.
But with respect to releasing data publicly, that is limited to HCA data. So your initial proposal is limited to HCA data, correct?
My initial proposal is that I have not found or seen any evidence, either in this record or in my experience with other utilities, to warrant the confidentiality of HCA data.
And when was your last background check?
I have not had a background check.
So you don't have any access to classified information or other threat assessments?
I do not currently have access. When I was on commission staff for both the California Commission and the Minnesota Commission, I was regularly engaged in a variety of conversations, including participation in the ES-ISAC, which is now called the E-ISAC. I have had and continue to have conversations with numerous security professionals about about threat landscapes associated with the distribution grid. And so while I do not have, nor have I had a background check, I certainly have had and continue to have conversations with a wide variety of security experts.
And that's the forms the basis of your opinion on the HCA data?
That's part of it.
So, and you've heard the company testify that it believes that certainly the HCA loading app is itself particularly sensitive and that other data should be protected behind certain security measures. Is that?
I know that is the company's position.
That is the company's position. And if the commission were to adopt your position, that would be contrary to the company's position, correct?
Yes.
And then if a catastrophic event happened, is it your opinion that the company should be liable for that catastrophic event? Or should have any liability for that?
If the so we would have to define what a catastrophic event means. Okay. So what is your, I don't know what you mean by catastrophic. Catastrophic.
I'll move on. That's perfectly fine. So and do you believe that the company has a reasonable responsibility to secure its systems?
I believe the utility has as you just said, to secure its systems, correct?
And do you think a utility should only be focused on existing and documented threats?
No.
So do you think a utility, as it's securing its systems, should at least be attuned to potential issues that may arise that have not yet occurred or have been documented?
I think it's my opinion that utility is subject to constant and evolving threats across its variety of landscapes, whether that is to your hardware, to your software, to your systems, or what have you, and that utility is responsible and is responsive to those changing threats.
And you don't believe the utility should have any deference in how it chooses to meet those obligations?
To the extent we're talking about your systems, sorry, I should have paused before I started. So I believe
I trained you well.
Let me see if I answer it this way, Mr. Simpson. How the utility responds to the threats across its system is the utility should do what it should do to ensure that threats do not proliferate and cause certain events to occur. And so to the extent that, I guess I'll say it this way, utility should not just have a static view of how its system is operating. It should have a very robust and dynamic view of how its system is operating. And that would also mean its security response should also be robust and not be static, because as I think we would know that the threat landscape is constantly changing.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Commissioner Gilman, anything for Mr. Villarreal?
Nothing, thanks.
I don't either. Mr. Wittersham, redirect.
Yes, very briefly, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Mr. Villarreal, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Do you recall just speaking with Mr. Simpson about your position on where the commission and the company should address the GMAC?
Yes.
In your opinion, why is addressing the GMAC in a rate case preferable?
So in my opinion, it's preferable because the rate case is where all of the costs are being put together and compared and looked at specifically around rate cases. And so a rate case is a terrible place to make policy. And so a distribution system plan is where we can talk about the policy going forward. and the rate case should be focused on the rates and what are the appropriate rates to be recovered or not recovered. And so that's part one. The other part is the way that I read the company's proposal is that we are now just creating yearly mini rate cases that are operating outside of the broader rate case process. And by not having them put together, it means there's a risk of what's been approved over here in the mini rate case, the mini GMAC rate case. That happens over here, and we're going to leave that over there. And when we talk about the rate case, well, it runs the risk of not wanting to talk about these costs again. And in my mind, it makes more sense to have the recoverability and prudency remain inside the rate case for efficiency and to ensure that these costs are being compared with each other, not individually and outside in different proceedings.
Thank you. And Mr. Villarreal, can you please briefly explain the concern you mentioned to Mr. Simpson about the DSP's evolution as a rate-focused proceeding rather than a long-term planning opportunity?
Yes. So the Commission's rules distribution system planning, I think, are really excellent and really provide stakeholders, the Commission, the utility, an opportunity to sit down and think about what is it that we want this grid to do and accomplish. And instead, by focusing on the costs, particularly the short-term costs, we then lose the opportunity to talk about what do we want to do in the long term. And are these costs actually beneficial to meeting the long-term vision and outcome and goals of what the Commission wants to accomplish through its distribution system planning rules?
Thank you, Mr. Villarreal. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, sir. You may be excused. Mr. Conadina, can you hold up your right hand? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No.
If that changes, will you let us know?
Yes, I will.
Back to you. You're a little soft to hear. Are you having trouble hearing him, Mr. Wittershine?
And Mr. Conadena, if you could maybe speak into the mic, you could test that.
I will do that.
Yeah, and speak loud. Back to you, Mr. Wittershine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Conadena, can you see and hear me all right?
Yes, Mr. Wittershine.
Thank you. Can you please state and spell your name?
Yeah, my name is Rao Konidena. Rao, R-A-O. Last name Konidena, K-O-N-I-D-E-N-A.
Where do you work and what is your position?
I have a company called Raycon Energy LLC, so I'm the principal.
And did you submit on behalf of UCA answer testimony that was marked as hearing exhibit 602, cross answer testimony that was marked as hearing exhibit 605, and the associated attachments?
Yes.
If I asked you the questions in your testimony today, would your answer still be the same?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Conadena is available for cross-examination and commissioner questions.
Public service, I have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Conadena.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lars.
Did I pronounce your last name right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. I'm 1 for 1 so far. Were you here when Ms. Henry Sermos testified on behalf of UCA?
Yes.
And she sent the budget-related questions to you. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Is anybody else having a hard time hearing it?
Yeah, I am. You were really clear for a second, and then you got unclear.
Mr. Conadena, your finger may have been on the microphone. I'm not sure if that was it.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah,
much better.
Yes.
Okay, I'll take out the headphones then.
All right. Thank you. So you're the UCA budget-related witness, correct?
For the portions that I talked about in my testimony, yes.
Right. So you focus in your testimony on the asset health and reliability and the capacity investments, correct?
Correct.
And you have some proposed reductions in asset health investment and capacity investment, correct?
Correct.
And you actually present a table in your testimony from 2025 to 2029 showing what those reductions are as a general matter, correct?
Correct.
Is it Ms. Kunkel today? Ms. Federico?
Yes, it's Casey.
Hi. Can we call up hearing exhibit 157, please? And Mr. Conidena, while we're calling that up, I know you looked at 2025 to 2029, but I'll represent to you that the company is seeking commission budget setting for 2026 to 2028. Do you have any reason to disagree with that?
No, I don't.
Okay. So, and we might, if we can make this slightly bigger. So what's up here? This has been marked as hearing exhibit 157, and what it is a series of tables, and I just want to walk through them with you, okay?
Okay.
So up in the top left-hand corner is JWI-R-2, which is Mr. Eiley's GMAC-related budget table showing 2026, 2027, and 2028. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. And that's got the totals going across the different investment categories. And it's got a total for the GMAC portion of the distribution capital budget down in the corner. You see that?
Yeah, GMAC portion of the distribution capital budget, yes.
Yes, sir. And then on the right-hand side is your figure 22, where you sum up your budget reductions in hearing exhibit 602. Do you recognize that table?
Yes.
Yeah, and apologies that it's small. I was trying to fit a lot of things on one slide here. And then coming back to the left side on lower down, what I've done is I've taken your 2026, 2027, and 2028 values for asset health and reliability and capacity, respectively, and put them into Mr. Eiley's table. You see that? And those numbers are marked in red.
Yes, so the 280, 372.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the 297 and the 431, and then the 308 and the 425. You see that?
Yes.
And then what I've done is I've retotaled them over on the far right-hand side with those red values, 885 and 1228, respectively. You see that?
Yes. So just to be sure, is this my table from the right side?
Yes, sir. So I've taken the numbers from the table on the right side and I put them into Mr. Eiley's table on the left side. You see that?
Okay, I see the 297 from the right side for 2027, in the 297 for 2027 in the left side. Yes.
Okay. So, and then what I've done is I've totaled it up to 2772 down there in the lower right-hand corner. See that?
Yes.
And subject to check, you don't have any reason to dispute my math on that, do you?
No, I don't.
Yeah. So, and that difference I'll represent to you between the company's number and the number in the table at the bottom is about $260 million. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
You're saying the difference between the 3 billion and the 2.7 is roughly 260 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So the difference between these two figures is about $260 million, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Federico, can we go to the next page of this exhibit, please? So based on those numbers, I'll represent to you that the UCA budget's about 90% of the PSCO budget from 2026 to 2028 based on those numbers. You agree with that?
I can't run the math in my head, but I don't know. I mean, is it 9% reduction of the 3 billion? I'm sorry. I'm not tracking.
Sure. Let me try to put some clarity around it. So it's approximately a 9% reduction going from Mr. Eiley's table in the upper left-hand corner of the prior slide to the table with your numbers in it in the lower left-hand corner of the slide. That's the 3032 to 2772.
Okay, yeah, obviously I don't have the percentage reduction that I calculated by myself, so I can't, put a finger on it, but I'll go with your math.
Okay, and so 9% reduction is one way to look at it, or the UCA budget being over 90% of the PSCO budget is another way to look at it. Isn't that true?
I guess 9% reduction or 90% over. Okay, yeah, following so far.
Okay, so it's about 90 cents on a dollar, give or take. Is that a fair representation?
I'm sorry, 90 cents on a dollar?
Yeah, so for every dollar that's in the PSCO budget, yours has about 90 cents, correct?
Yes, okay.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would move the admission of hearing exhibit 157.
Any objection?
No objection.
So moved.
And with that, Mr. Conadena, thank you for your time. I don't have anything further. And Mr. Chair, the company's going to waive its cross-examination of Mr. Neal.
Thank you on that. Commissioner Gilman, any questions for Mr. Conadina?
I do. I have a couple. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Conadina.
Hello, Commissioner Gilman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So just a couple questions. I want to mostly focus on some of the reliability analysis that you did within your answer testimony. So you criticized the company as not having provided quantifiable feeder level or system level estimates showing how their capital investments will improve reliability on the system. And I'm just curious, in your experience, should they be able to calculate that, and what sort of metrics or information would you expect to be provided?
I was not proposing any new metrics, but definitely they should be able to calculate the industry-wide metrics that we use for reliability, like SAIDI, SAIFI, and KD. One stands for duration, the other stands for frequency, as well as customer outages. So I was hoping for looking at that sort of metrics to ascertain if they are going to set aside a specific budget for improving feeders, and we want to measure, okay, these investments are helping the customers at the end of the day, then there would be an improvement in the metric like a SAIDI or SAIFI or a KD. And so that's what I was looking for.
Okay. And then you also pointed out in your answer testimony a lack of alignment, as you called it, between historical reliability issues, especially related to the FPIP feeders and SAIDI trends, and DSP capital investments as reflected on the grid needs assessment. You say suggesting that the company is not using reliability data as a primary driver for DSP investments. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, Commissioner Gilman.
Okay. And so you say instead the investments appear to be more influenced by forward-looking forecasts rather than these persistent reliability concerns. And so curious, what, if it's SAIDI, SAIFI, if we should look at those system-wide or on, census block levels, what would you see as appropriate metrics to be tracking to understand if the investments do have a measurable impact on reliability for customers?
Yes, Commissioner Gilman. So when I was trying to, in my mind, link the feeder performance improvement program investments to the reliability work done, I believe, which was also discussed around what the company projects to do. and tie that back to the feeders that the company was forecasting in this DSP, I had a hard time trying to figure out, okay, obviously the feeders in the grid needs assessment are going to be quote unquote mitigated for the risks that have been identified. And yet, when I looked at the SAIDI, SAIFI, and KD metrics that the company puts out in the quality of service plan QSP in different years, there was not a straight comparison, so to speak, because I believe the census block thing, the metrics are now reported on a census block, so to speak, very recently. So there was no track record that I could, for example, glean for that past few years, and that led me to thinking like, okay, so what is going on here in terms of investments? Is it primarily a new customer driven investments? Because the company said, oh, we don't know whether they're new customer driven investments or organic investments, because we don't drive that boat, so to speak, is at least how I understood the discovery response. So basically what I ended up trying to, I guess this is what I said, is the investments are a little bit uncoordinated. I think that's the word I used, because there are reliability investments. Obviously, we want the company to invest in feeders that have poor performance. And then there is reliability work done on them. So that's one set of investments. And then there are investments, obviously, in this system for future growth that are coming up because of the N-0 and N-1 risks. And there was another investment stream that I'm missing out, but it felt like I couldn't. Yes, the reliability investments in the past were not in planning divisions that had reliability problems, so to speak, in that QSP reports. So that's where I was basically saying this seems a little bit uncoordinated, not coordinated. So on one end, yes, the company has to make reliability investments through FPIP program. I understand that. But on the other hand, they have to make these capacity investments as well. But there is no correlation. So so I was concerned that it's very hard to keep track of where the money is going, so to speak.
Okay. And related to that, you pointed out trouble in comparing the SAIDI values pre-2024 with those after 2024 due to a difference in how those were being reported. And I was just curious, are there corrections that can be made to the data? Is that an insurmountable problem if we were looking at different reliability screens? You know, do we actually have comparable data going back several years upon which we could rely based on your analysis of it?
Yes, Commissioner Gilman, I think the problem that I have, and I don't think I have a specific recommendation other than trying to provide for the reader like myself charts that are the tables that are consistent with previous reports, so that you can compare if the metrics have improved or not improved. Because when we have the same report and the same table released annually, as a reader, we expect to see data in a certain format. But if that format has changed, even in a very simple way, like census block units or something, now it's reported versus whatever it was, and there is no explanation or data linkage in how the current report relates to the past report for that particular metric, I had a tough time trying to make sense out of it. So that's what I am referring to, or maybe that would be by recommendation, in saying that it would be nice to have an explanation on how the metrics in this report on a census CBU basis, I don't know what the acronym stands for, relates to the past reports where it was reported at a planning division level, I think.
Okay. One other question in a slightly different area. You'd also criticized the company for seeing active demand management as primarily or only a strategy to reduce the bulk system peak needs rather than a strategy to reduce these N-0, N-1 asset risks on the distribution system. Are you familiar with that?
I am vaguely familiar with that, making that argument. Yes, Commissioner Gilman.
Okay. And I was just curious, given where we are in this proceeding with the company having identified some needs they say already exist, some needs that are based on forecasts, and then this concurrent VPP apparatus meant to, ideally help to stage DERs and other demand management. I'm curious what you see, if anything, as the path forward to kind of build upon your critique that it makes little sense to go spend all the money and then identify or investigate the ways to make the best use of active demand management to mitigate distribution system needs. But I was just curious, given where we are, how you might see that actually moving forward to kind of be more actionable on that critique.
Yes, Commissioner Gilman. I have high hopes for the non-wire alternative settlement, to be honest with you, to answer this question, because the company is saying on a rolling basis they will release these opportunities. So, and I have been asking, or I've been vocal about getting a quote-unquote portfolio-based solutions, that meaning whoever brings a non-wire alternatives would be able to mix and match a demand response with a smart panel, for example. That's what I have been, consistently recommending, so to speak, because I see the value in that from an engineering sense. And so, to answer your question, the critique that I had was primarily around, I believe, targeted demand areas and the opportunities that the company identified for targeted demand areas in years beyond 2030. And I think the company used the term relatively small overloads, which I kind of latched onto. And I said, okay, there are relatively small overloads even in these years, 26, 25 beyond, and why not do certain targeted demand areas now? Why wait till 2030? And so I guess I'm not been very fine-tuned about my recommendations, but I suspect the answer is in this rolling solicitation process, as well as the opportunity that the company sees with these relatively small overloads that come up in this distribution system plan.
Okay, thanks. Those are my only questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do not have any questions. Mr. Wittershine, redirect.
No redirect, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Coney.
Thank you.
You may be excused, sir. Mr. Althouse, I see you have your hand up, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to wave my cross of Mr. Neal.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Gilman, any questions for Mr. Neal?
I do not.
Nor do I. So I think Mr. Neal is excused. The risks of going last, Mr. Wittershine.
Thank you.
I think that completes our hearing. Any final matters on the record? I would propose statement of positions to September 26th, consistent with the party's proposed procedural schedule. Does that still work for people?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that works for public service.
Mr. Wittershine?
That also works for UCA. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any final record or evidentiary matters?
Nothing further from public service.
If everybody could turn on their cameras for one last moment, that'd be appreciated. Just want to thank everybody for an engaging and thoughtful process. Appreciate you all. As always, I learned a ton, and I think we're gonna deliberate on this in October. And I think the 250-day process runs till November 3rd, 2025. So any final thoughts, Ms. Dundas?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing from me. Just confirming with Ms. Federico, she had no outstanding concerns with any of the exhibits. I don't know of any.
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
Great.
Commissioner Gilman, final thoughts?
No, just as always, thank you to you all for your participation here, to our staff behind the scenes, our advisors, counsel, and of course legal assistants who are keeping this ship running.
Keeping the lights on.
Thanks to everybody, and certainly appreciate it.
All right, thanks all.
Thank you.
The evidentiary record's closed, Chair.
Oh yeah, the evidentiary record is now closed and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.